I thought my car had been stolen for about 3 seconds. Then I noticed the bright orange sticker slapped across my garage door and realized something even stranger had happened. Somebody hadn't stolen my car. They had legally stolen it. At least that's what they wanted me to believe. That Tuesday morning started like every other Tuesday in the quiet neighborhood of Cedar Ridge outside Columbus, Ohio. I had a client presentation downtown. One of those meetings you spend a week preparing for, because if it goes well, it pays your mortgage for months. I grabbed my laptop bag, poured the last sip of coffee into a travel mug, and headed outside, already running 5 minutes late. Then I stopped. My driveway was empty. I remember standing there blinking like an idiot, looking left and right as if my Honda Accord might somehow reappear if I looked hard enough. The space where it should have been was completely bare. At first I genuinely thought someone had stolen it during the night. My heart dropped into my stomach. Then I saw the sticker. Big orange letters. Towed vehicle notice. Below it was a phone number and the logo for a company called Premier Vehicle Recovery. I called immediately. A guy answered on the second ring, sounding like I had interrupted his breakfast. "Yeah," he said. "You towed my car," I snapped. "From my driveway." There was a pause followed by a keyboard clicking. Then he read my license plate number and casually said, "Vehicle was illegally parked in a designated fire access zone. $350 for release. Storage starts tomorrow." I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. A fire lane? My driveway is a fire lane now. "Sir, if you'd like your vehicle back, those are the fees." Click. He hung up. Just like that. No explanation. No discussion. Nothing. I stood there staring at my phone wondering if I had somehow fallen into an alternate universe where words didn't mean what they used to mean. My driveway wasn't a fire lane. It wasn't near a fire lane. It wasn't connected to a fire lane. It was a driveway attached to a house that I owned outright. No HOA. No condo association. No property management company. Just me, a 38-year-old marketing consultant who mostly minded his own business and occasionally forgot to mow his lawn on schedule. I missed the meeting. I had to call an Uber. By the time I reached the impound lot on the edge of town, I was angry enough to chew nails. The place looked like every sketchy tow yard you've ever imagined. Chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Broken cars sitting on dirt lots. A trailer serving as the office. The clerk behind the window slid paperwork toward me without making eye contact. $350. I paid because I needed my car. That's how these operations work. They know people have jobs, appointments, kids to pick up, lives to live. They don't give you a real choice. While I was signing the paperwork, I asked the tow truck driver why my vehicle had been taken. He leaned against the wall, crossed his arms, and shrugged. Orders came from property management. What property management? I asked. I own my house. Another shrug. Not my problem, man. That answer stayed with me the entire drive home. Property management. The phrase made absolutely no sense. The more I thought about it, the more irritated I became. By dinner time, irritation had turned into curiosity. Curiosity turned into suspicion. And suspicion eventually pushed me off my couch and onto my front porch. I started with the house across the street. Then the next one. Then another. I figured maybe somebody knew something I didn't. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe there had been complaints about parking. Maybe the city had changed regulations. I was searching for any explanation that sounded remotely logical. Instead, what I found was something far worse. The first real clue came from an elderly widow named Linda Parker who lived 2 blocks away. When I mentioned the towing company, her face immediately hardened. "They got you too?" she asked. I remember that exact wording. Not what happened. Not really. Just they got you too? She told me her SUV had disappeared 3 months earlier while she was baking cookies for her grandchildren. Same company. Same fee. Same claim about a fire lane violation. The next house gave me another story. Then another. Then another. By 9 o'clock that night, I had spoken with 7 different families. Every one of them had been towed. Every one of them had paid hundreds of dollars. Every one of them had been given the exact same excuse. And as I stood in my kitchen later that night staring at a legal pad covered in notes, names, dates, and addresses, I realized something that sent a chill straight down my spine. These weren't random incidents. Somebody was targeting people. I just didn't know who yet, or why. The next morning I skipped work entirely and started treating the whole thing like a puzzle that refused to leave me alone. Maybe it sounds obsessive, But once you've spent $350 retrieving a car that was taken from your own driveway, you either let it go or you start asking questions. I couldn't let it go. So I went back through every conversation from the night before and started looking for details I might have missed. Around noon, I called Linda Parker again. Then I called 2 other neighbors. What happened next was the moment the entire story changed. Linda mentioned that about a day before her SUV was towed, she'd politely asked her next-door neighbor to stop letting his dog bark outside after midnight. The second neighbor, a college student named Ethan Walsh, remembered asking a guy named Trevor Kane to move several trash bins that were blocking the sidewalk. The Martinez family had complained about loud music during a backyard gathering. Different people, different situations. Same person. Trevor Kane. I knew Trevor. Everyone knew Trevor. He lived 3 houses down from me. Mid-40s, always wearing expensive sunglasses, always driving whatever truck he happened to be showing off that month, always acting like he owned the neighborhood even though nobody had elected him to anything. He wasn't openly hostile. He was worse. He was the kind of guy who smiled while making sure you paid for disagreeing with him. At first I told myself it was a coincidence. Then I kept digging. By the end of the week, I had identified 11 towing victims. 10 of them had some kind of disagreement with Trevor within 48 hours of their vehicle disappearing. The odds of that happening by chance were practically zero. That's when I started documenting everything. I created spreadsheets, timelines, maps, every complaint, every tow, every interaction. My dining room slowly transformed into something that looked like a detective's office from a crime movie. My girlfriend Sarah walked in one evening, stared at the papers covering the table, and asked, "Please tell me you're not starting a conspiracy board." I pointed at the evidence. "Tell me this doesn't look weird." 20 minutes later, she was helping me organize witness statements. The deeper we went, the stranger things became. The towing company's paperwork listed a business address 20 miles away. I drove there on Saturday morning. The address led to an abandoned service station that had been closed for nearly 6 years. The windows were boarded up. Weeds grew through cracked concrete. Nobody had operated a business there in ages. That should have been enough to trigger alarms. Instead, it was only the beginning. I searched state licensing records. No active towing license. I searched corporate registrations. The company existed on paper, but the information attached to it looked suspiciously incomplete. Then I found the owner's name. I still remember staring at my laptop screen in disbelief. Trevor Michael Kane. I actually leaned back in my chair and laughed because it was so absurd. The towing company belonged to Trevor. Not partially. Not through a cousin. Not through some complicated business arrangement. It belonged directly to him. Suddenly, every piece started falling into place. The complaints. The timing. The fake violations. The impossible explanations. It wasn't a towing business. It was a revenge business disguised as a towing business. And if I was right, he wasn't just targeting me. He'd been targeting anyone who annoyed him for years. Most people would have gone straight to the police at that point. I thought about it. Sarah thought I should. My brother thought I should. But something bothered me. If Trevor had been doing this for years, then one complaint wasn't going to expose the entire operation. He'd deny everything. He'd claim misunderstandings. He'd hire a lawyer. The victims would still be out thousands of dollars. So instead I called someone else. My cousin Ryan Mercer. Ryan was an investigative reporter in Cincinnati. We'd grown up together. As kids we'd spent summers getting into trouble. As adults he'd turned curiosity into a career. When I explained everything, there was a long silence. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "Don't call anyone yet. Let's see how deep this goes." 2 days later Ryan arrived with cameras, recording equipment, and the kind of energy that usually means somebody is about to make bad people very nervous. For nearly 2 weeks, we worked quietly. We interviewed victims. We gathered documents. We pulled public records. Ryan brought in a licensed investigator named Carla Benson, who specialized in fraud cases. Carla was the real deal. Calm, methodical, scary smart. Within 48 hours, she uncovered things none of us expected. Several towing receipts contained identical signatures supposedly made by different employees. Vehicle release forms referenced municipal codes that didn't actually exist. Some paperwork listed fire safety regulations copied from entirely different states. Somebody wasn't just bending rules. Somebody was manufacturing them. Meanwhile, Carla started tracking the tow truck itself. What she discovered nearly made Ryan fall out of his chair. The truck's registration records were a mess. VIN discrepancies, expired permits, insurance issues. In several cases, the vehicle appeared to be operating under information that didn't match state databases. Every new discovery made the operation look less like a business and more like organized theft wearing a reflective safety vest. Then came the break we had been waiting for. A young family on Willow Court announced a weekend garage sale. Their driveway filled with visitors. Cars lined both sides of the street. Perfectly legal. Perfectly normal. Carla suspected Trevor would see it as an opportunity. So we watched. Hidden cameras captured the entire thing. Around 10:30 in the morning, Trevor arrived in his pickup truck. He parked around the corner, stepped out carrying several metal signs, and started walking toward the street. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Then he began placing temporary signs along the curb. Fire access zone. No parking. Tow away enforced. Completely fake. Completely unauthorized. He planted them like a gardener setting flowers into the ground. Then he took photographs. He literally created the violation himself. Ryan whispered, "Please tell me we're getting all this." Carla didn't even look away from the monitor. Every second. 20 minutes later, the tow truck appeared. Visitors at the garage sale had no idea what was happening. They were buying old bicycles and children's toys, while Trevor's driver hooked up vehicles one by one. We recorded everything. The signs. The photographs. The calls. The towing process. Every piece of the scam operating in real time. One woman came running out screaming that her car was being stolen. The driver pointed at the fake sign and told her she should have read the rules. I watched that scene and felt something shift inside me. Until then, I'd been angry about my own car. Watching that woman nearly cry beside the street made me realize this wasn't about me anymore. Trevor had built an entire system around intimidation. He counted on people feeling powerless. He counted on them paying the fee, cursing under their breath, and moving on with their lives. What he never expected was somebody documenting every step. That evening, Ryan looked through the footage and simply said, "He's done." But neither of us understood just how done he really was. Because while we were preparing the story, more victims started coming forward. Calls arrived from neighboring communities. Similar complaints. Same towing company. Same fake fire lane claims. Same demands for cash. The picture was getting bigger by the hour, and by the time Ryan's producers finished reviewing the evidence, what started as a neighborhood dispute was turning into something that looked a whole lot like a criminal enterprise operating across multiple suburbs. We had enough evidence to expose him publicly, and Trevor Kane had absolutely no idea the walls were already closing in around him. The story aired on a Thursday night. I'll never forget sitting in Ryan's living room watching the broadcast begin. For weeks, the whole thing had existed inside notebooks, spreadsheets, witness statements, surveillance footage, and late-night conversations. Suddenly, it was on television for everyone to see. The headline filled the screen, "Neighborhood Towing Scheme Exposed." Then came the footage. Trevor placing fake signs. Trevor photographing areas he had just manipulated. The tow truck arriving. Victims describing how they had been forced to pay hundreds of dollars to recover vehicles taken from perfectly legal locations. One after another, the pieces fell into place in front of thousands of viewers. Ryan's team had done an incredible job. They didn't exaggerate anything. They didn't need to. The truth was more shocking than anything they could have invented. My phone started buzzing before the segment even ended. Text messages, calls, emails. People I hadn't spoken to in years were asking if the guy in the story was really the same Trevor Kane they knew. Former victims began reaching out from neighboring towns. Some had paid a few $100s. Others had paid thousands over multiple incidents. One retired couple told me they'd emptied part of their emergency savings because their vehicle had been towed 3 separate times. That's when I realized the scale of what we had uncovered. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and stepped onto my front porch. Across the street, several police vehicles were parked outside Trevor's house. For a moment, I honestly thought I was still dreaming. Then I saw detectives carrying boxes toward their cars. Neighbors stood outside pretending not to watch, while very obviously watching. One officer walked Trevor down the driveway in handcuffs. The same driveway where he'd spent years acting untouchable. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just ordinary. The confidence was gone. The swagger was gone. All that remained was a middle-aged man discovering that actions eventually come due. As he passed the crowd, his eyes briefly landed on me. We didn't say a word. We didn't need to. Everything that needed to be said had already been said by the evidence. The investigation expanded quickly after the arrest. Prosecutors uncovered records connecting the operation to 3 separate suburban communities. Financial documents revealed years of fraudulent towing fees. Witnesses kept appearing. Former employees cooperated. By the time authorities finished adding everything together, the total amount collected through the scheme approached $400,000. $400,000. All generated from fake violations, intimidation, fabricated paperwork, and people's desire to avoid a bigger headache. The charges piled up. Fraud, theft, forgery, operating without proper licensing, filing false records. Several civil lawsuits followed immediately. Victims who thought they would never see their money again suddenly had a chance. Months later, restitution payments started arriving. Some families received reimbursement checks. Others received additional damages through settlements. Linda Parker called me the day her payment arrived. She cried before she even finished the sentence. Not because of the money, although that helped. It was because somebody had finally listened. Somebody had finally believed her. Trevor eventually lost almost everything. His house was sold. His vehicles were seized. Recreational property he owned was liquidated to satisfy judgments. For years he'd treated people like easy targets because he assumed nobody would push back hard enough to matter. That assumption turned out to be the most expensive mistake of his life. Looking back, the strangest part is how close I came to doing exactly what he expected. If I had simply paid the $350, complained for a few days, and moved on, none of this would have happened. Trevor probably would have continued running the scam for years. More families would have lost money. More people would have convinced themselves fighting back wasn't worth the effort. And honestly, I understand why. Most of us are busy. We have jobs, families, bills, responsibilities. When someone creates a problem, paying it often feels easier than confronting it. That's exactly what people like Trevor depend on. They don't rely on strength. They rely on exhaustion. They rely on the idea that ordinary people won't have the time or energy to challenge them. In my case, they picked the wrong driveway. What started as the worst Tuesday morning of my year ended up teaching me something I'll never forget. Sometimes the small injustices matter because they're practiced for bigger ones. If people get away with little abuses of power long enough, eventually they stop being little. So now whenever someone asks whether all the effort was worth it, I think about that empty driveway, that orange sticker on my garage door, and the moment I realized none of it made sense. Then I think about the victims who got their money back and the families who no longer had to worry about being targeted. And my answer is always the same. Absolutely. Every single second was worth it. But here's the question I want to leave with you. If your car disappeared from your own driveway and somebody demanded hundreds of dollars to get it back, would you have fought back the way I did? Or would you have paid the fee and moved on? And where do you think the line is between keeping the peace and allowing bad behavior to continue? Let me know in the comments because I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes ordinary people can't make a difference. Sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to stay quiet.